is, by a huge margin, the largest tax haven in the world. So you take all the traditional tax havens that we know about. If you take all the foreign assets held in these tax haven jurisdictions and you add them all up, combined, all of them together, it's less than the foreign assets that are held in the U.S. by a massive margin. I went to university when I was 18, dropped out when I was 19, started a company that did fairly well, and then sold it, and I went back to university in my 30s. I started trading stocks when I was 14. I had a business law class in high school. My business law teacher, she came to the class to teach us about stock investing. I told her I was already trading stocks and had been for a while. She goes, bring me your brokerage account statement, and I'm curious to see what you trade and all that stuff. So I brought it in, and she's like, oh my God, you're making more money than I am trading. This is crazy. I actually bought a company once from a competitor who was about to go to jail for non-payment of his payroll tax.
Amazing.
Like, for real.
Yeah.
The guy owed $186,000 in tax. He was in a desperate situation. Yeah. I told him right there on the phone, in a 30-minute phone call, I said, look, I want to verify your numbers. I want to see your bank statements. I want to see your tax returns, all that stuff. I want to see your invoice statements with Home Depot. Home Depot is mainly his client. I want to talk to two of your key employees. If everything checks out, I'll give you $200,000 next week. But here's the deal. This is a final offer. We're not negotiating anymore. You don't go talk to anybody else. If you literally have one conversation with one other person, deal's off the table. That's it. We're done.
Wow.
I don't give a fuck. I'll let you go to jail. And I said, I'll just take your clients from you when you're in prison.
Hello and welcome to the podcast Hostel. This is another episode that we've got brewing. This is being recorded live right now in Salvador in Brazil. We just got off the Nomad Cruise 12 where I met a very interesting guy. His name is Bobby Casey. Welcome people. I saw Bobby Casey did a talk on, what was the name of your talk?
It was where to form or where to register your company as a digital nomad.
Yeah.
It's basically a company structure consultation for location independent entrepreneurs with a little bit of tax mixed in. I normally give a tax consultation talk.
Yeah.
In my normal, it's tax and residency solutions for digital nomads. It's a regular talk. In that talk, I have one slide about company structure, and so this time I gave a talk and expanded on the one slide, basically.
Yeah, it was just company structure, but basically, the idea is to not pay taxes. Basically, that's the whole goal of.
Well, it depends. Everybody's situation is a little bit different.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you are, let's say, selling physical goods in France, and you have a warehouse in France, and you're selling physical goods in the French market, you can't optimize completely out of tax. You can't pay zero in that scenario.
Right.
But the goal is to minimize.
Yeah.
If you can minimize to zero, great. But the goal is minimization.
Yeah.
The more you can minimize, the better. If you can get to zero, amazing. And in a lot of cases, especially for people who have virtual businesses, maybe selling digital downloadable products, or info products, or consulting, coaching, software, stuff like that, it is possible to get to zero in a lot of cases.
That's great. That's great. And I remember you were saying, because I was looking at registering my company in Georgia, the country of Georgia.
Yeah.
And you said you've been getting a lot of people hitting you up about Georgia. So why don't you talk a little about Georgia?
I have gotten a lot of people lately. For some reason, I think I know why. There is a particular marketing guy out there who talks a lot about Georgia, and he is, let's say he's very well known from a marketing perspective. He's not very effective at doing what he claims, but from a marketing perspective, his stuff is out there, like his YouTube channel and all that stuff.
Right.
I think probably because of that, a lot of people are inquiring about Georgia, but Georgia...
the sell on Georgia is, for me, was they say if you make less than $200,000 a year, and you have, let's say, virtual products, like I'm a software developer, that you wouldn't have to pay anything in taxes, which is incredibly appealing.
Right. Yeah. And And there is a way to do that, to get into a zero tax rate. There's some restrictions and some nuances to get approved.
In Georgia.
Yeah, in Georgia. There's some restrictions and some nuances to get approved for that. It is possible, no doubt. The downside is with Georgia is it's not the most appealing jurisdiction. For example, if you've got clients in Canada and you're sending them an invoice from a Georgian company, problem is you can have the bank of your client start asking questions like, why are you sending money to Georgia?
Right.
We need more information. We need a copy. We need your invoice. We need a copy of that person's KYC. We need updated on your KYC.
What is KYC, sir?
KYC stands for Know Your Customer.
Okay.
It's bank regulation stuff, like where they need to know who you are, certified notarized copies of passports, utility bills to show your home address. So oftentimes...
So you need to be able to prove who you're hiring, or who is working
and
for
who
you.
you are, and who you're paying, and the invoice that is for, what you did, what type of work you did, and how much they paid you, and where the money came from, and how they earned their money. So sometimes when you deal with some of these, let's say, not first-tier banking jurisdictions, you can run into that problem.
Right, where one bank, once you start sending enough money or you start receiving enough money in your, let's say, Georgian bank account from a Canadian client, the Canadian bank of your...
It wouldn't necessarily be a threshold. You could send, like, let's say you did a software project for somebody and you charge them $15,000.
Sure.
You send them an invoice for $15,000.
Yeah.
And then, let's say they bank with TD Bank in Toronto.
Yeah.
And then you send the invoice and it's from XYZ Limited in Tbilisi, Georgia, with a bank account at Bank of Georgia.
Right.
And TD Bank in Toronto says, hey, well, hold up a minute. We need a bit more information. We need a copy of the invoice. We need some additional KYC documentation. We need proof of how you earned this money and what you did. So they make you jump through additional hoops, and it can be problematic. And then in some cases, there are jurisdictions that don't, like, for example, right now in the U.S., you're going to have a really hard time if you're doing business with a Georgian company with U.S. clients, because it's not exactly that Georgia has been blacklisted specifically, but it is still considered a place where Russians launder money.
Okay, so there's a bad reputation for the country.
There's a reputational issue with Georgia specifically, and other countries too, but we're talking about Georgia.
Sure.
But there could be a reputational issue because if you're sending an invoice for $20,000, which is not that much money, to a U.S. client, that bank in the U.S. could say, well, we don't send money to Georgia.
Right.
They could actually just not allow you to send the money.
Right, okay. But you can also then, can you have, let's say, your company is in Georgia, but your bank account is somewhere else? Like, does your bank account need to be in the same country as your company? How does all that work? How is banking and...
In most cases, yes.
Yeah, it needs to be.
There's some exceptions to that rule, but for the most part, yeah. And especially if you are doing any type of merchant payment processing, Stripe, PayPal, merchant account, stuff like that. If you're, like, for example, if you have a Stripe account, people are paying you by credit card. Let's say you got a software company or you send invoices and they pay you with a credit card or something. You can't do that. Your Stripe account, your bank account, and your company registration have to align in one country.
Right, okay.
And keep in mind, if we're still talking about Stripe here, you also can only, if you want to have a Stripe account, it has to be in a jurisdiction that Stripe allows as part of their terms of service. Georgia is not one of those.
Right.
So you couldn't even have a Stripe account with the Georgian company. I mean, unless this is something recent that they've changed. But as far as I know, as it is today, as of we're doing this, for the most recent time I've looked, Stripe does not accept Georgian companies.
Okay. Interesting.
So you would have to have some other type of merchant processing. You could go to like TBC or Bank of Georgia and ask them to set you up with a merchant account, and then you can take credit cards.
How do you?
But it's got to be in the jurisdiction where the company
Yeah, I understand.
is registered.
Bit of a side question. How do you keep up to date with all of this? Like, there's how many 200 countries out there? You seem to know everything about every single one of them in terms of the tax code and the legal system. Like,
So I am not the go-to person for optimizing within your home jurisdiction.
okay.
Like, let's say you're German, live in Germany,
Yeah.
and want to optimize your business for the German tax system. That's not me. My expertise lies in helping you escape your home
Kind
country.
of offshore it, right? So it is a different thing, let's say,
It's
as
completely different, yeah.
yeah, an American trying to reduce the tax load in America versus
Yeah, I mean, I could probably help Americans better in the U.S. only because I'm American and I know a bit more about that.
sure.
But that's not really my specialty. In reality, like, you shouldn't be coming to me for that. You should be coming to, like, your tax person in the U.S. I would be the person you come to help set the structure up, to
Right.
optimize your personal and your business situation,
Right.
how it all kind of connects to where you have physical residency, where you have tax residency, because
Yeah.
they're not the same,
Right.
plus where your company is structured, how you get paid, and other how you interact with other countries, because there's a lot of cross-border issues or multi-jurisdictional issues that come into play there. That's my area of expertise. So if you ask me, I want to invest in real estate in Germany, what's the best way to minimize my taxes as a real estate investor in Germany? I have no idea. That's not my thing.
Right.
But if you tell me, I'm a German with an e-commerce business selling in North America and I'm living in Thailand, that's what I could do.
Yeah, that's when you start to step in. So, like, let's take me for an example. I'm an Australian software developer. I live in Serbia now. And you were telling me before Wyoming or something, how do I get to that golden 0% tax in a legal way?
Well, I mean, we're not really in a situation where I could do a direct consultation because I also need my resources.
Yeah.
So if we were doing a consultation, I would have my laptop open.
Right.
I would have my resources on tax residency for Serbia, tax
Yeah.
residency for Australia,
Yeah.
the CFC rules for if you're resident in Serbia, the CFC
Yeah.
rules for Serbia, and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Now, I can tell you off the top of my head what I do know.
Sure.
Serbia does not have CFC rules.
What is CFC?
CFC stands for Controlled Foreign Corporation Rules.
Okay.
And so basically what that means is, it's easier to do this as a comparison. So if you're a Serbian and
Yeah.
you have a company outside of Serbia,
Yeah.
you don't have to allocate the profits of the company to you personally. You only have to pay tax in Serbia based on the amount of money you pay yourself as a salary from that company.
Okay.
Whereas if I were German, because of German CFC rules, if I owned a company outside of Germany, let's say I make $1 million a year as a German through my company, but I only pay myself a salary of $50,000. As a German resident, I would have to pay tax on the million.
Dang.
Because of German CFC rules.
Right.
I'm simplifying this because
Yeah,
there's a lot of nuances here.
Sure.
But generally speaking, if I'm Serbian and I earn $1 million a year and I only pay myself a salary of 50, I only have to pay tax on the 50 in Serbia.
But that's to Serbia, but then if the company is elsewhere, do I have to pay the taxes on wherever that company is registered? Or how does all that bloody...
Depends on the company.
It's not that simple.
Depends on the company. So the company, if the company has company taxation, you have to pay company tax.
Right.
If it was pass-through taxation, then the tax would pass through to you personally, or possibly to a holding company or something like that, and then the taxation would be based on you personally. But then there's variables with pass-through taxation too. Like in the U.S., you have LLCs, which the default tax status of an LLC in the U.S. is pass-through.
Can you define what an LLC is?
Limited liability company.
Yeah.
Yeah, so LLC is a limited liability company. It's kind of a hybrid between a corporation and a partnership. But you don't have to have multiple members in an LLC to own it. You can have one, you can have more than one, you can have 1,000, whatever.
Okay.
But structurally, it functions like a partnership, but it has the liability protections of a corporation. Actually, it's got better liability protection than a corporation.
Okay.
But an LLC, by default, it's pass-through. So the company profits are not, the company doesn't pay tax on company profits. The individual that owns the company pays tax on company profits.
Okay, so the LLC, is not a taxable entity.
In most cases. In the U.S., there are some exceptions to that rule.
Yeah.
Like, for example, if you have an office or you have employees in the U.S., and you have what's called nexus, then the income from that company would be taxable in the U.S. to the person who earned it. So the company's still not taxable, but you, as the owner of the company, because you had nexus in the U.S., would have a tax obligation on it. If you have what's called ECI, or effectively connected income to a trade or business, then you would have a tax obligation in the U.S. And that's a little bit of maybe a misnomer. It's a little bit of a tricky determinant if you have ECI or not. But if you sell physical goods and services in the U.S., you have ECI. Okay. But if you sell digital products, coaching, software, something like that, your ECI is determined by where you actually do the work, where it's actually done. And so if all your team were in the U.S., then yes, you would have ECI. But let's say all your team was in Ukraine, then you would not have ECI in the U.S.
Okay. So there's a lot of stuff going on. I'm learning a lot from you.
A lot of moving parts when it comes to this.
A lot of moving parts. But I remember in your talk you also mentioned that America is the biggest tax haven in the world.
By a very large margin.
Can you elaborate on that? I've never heard that before.
Yeah, the U.S. is, by a huge margin, the largest tax haven in the world. Actually, so you take all the traditional tax havens that we know about, Cayman, BVI, Bermuda, Bahamas, places like that.
Yeah.
You can even lump in like Switzerland, Liechtenstein, and Luxembourg, and places like that. Those are kind of your Panama, those are kind of your old school, traditional, what we know, what we identify as tax havens.
Yeah.
If you take all the, like the foreign assets held in these tax haven jurisdictions and you add them all up, combined, all of them together, it's less than the foreign assets that are held in the U.S. by a massive margin.
Right.
And so in the U.S. is by a large margin the largest tax haven in the world, just not for Americans, because of a lot of loopholes that allow non-U.S. persons to conduct business and manage investments in the U.S. without having a U.S. tax obligation.
It's incredible. I mean, it seems that's a recurring theme all over the world, doing business in that country as a citizen versus not being a citizen. You get more benefits when you're not a citizen almost, right? Like, would you say that's a fair observation?
Actually, I always call that the golden rule for expats and nomads. Is you're treated better as a tourist or an immigrant than a citizen.
It's true.
100%. So if you are, what's an example here? Mexico is a good example. If you're a citizen of Mexico, it's not very easy to be considered non-tax resident in Mexico. Even if you leave the country and you live abroad and you're a digital nomad or whatever, it's not so easy to be considered a non-tax resident in Mexico. You actually have to go get residency somewhere else and prove to the Mexican tax office your tax home is in that other country. Okay. However, for non-Mexican people who want to go live in Mexico, it is extremely easy to live there tax-free for the rest of your life.
Amazing.
Because of the way they treat immigrants and tourists. There's even a line in their tax code that says, if you are living in residential property in Mexico for what they call touristic purposes, you are not considered a tax resident. In other words, let's say you go buy a house or a condo or something in, I don't know, like Tulum, for example. You go buy, a beach, jungle condo actually in Tulum. But let's say you go buy a jungle condo in Tulum. And you go live in it half the year, or even more than half the year, 7, 8 months, whatever. But technically speaking, under Mexican law, you're there for touristic purposes because Mexico's not really what you consider your center of vital interest. Meaning it's not like your home base, it's not where you work, it's not where you earn income. You have that somewhere else. Well, Mexico literally says it in their tax law that if you're only there for touristic purposes, no matter how long you're there, you don't have to pay tax in Mexico. It literally says it in the law, which is crazy. They literally give an exemption for people living in the country for touristic purposes. Now, when I say, but you can still have residency, physical residency, like a residence permit, rights to reside, because tax residency and physical residency are two different things.
Right.
Physical residency is your rights to reside. It's managed by like the migration office in that country, and you have to meet certain requirements to be eligible to reside in that country.
Right.
So in Mexico, continue to use it as an example. There's several ways to do that, but like for temporary residency, it's easy. You need to make like $3,000 a month. That's it.
And they just give you temporary residency.
You get temporary residency. That's it. $3,000 a month, you're in the door. No problem.
And they don't ask any tax.
Yeah, and so you get temporary residency. It's good for a year.
Yeah.
And then after a year, you can renew it. And then the second card is good for 3 years. And then after 4 total, you get permanent residency.
Right.
But there's no minimum stay requirement. You can't actually work in Mexico like that. So you don't actually have rights to work in Mexico anyway. But you can do your business.
Yeah, they don't care.
Sitting at your apartment in Tulum.
They don't care.
They don't care.
Right.
And you have a tax exemption because technically, even though you have physical residency, you're still there for touristic purposes.
Yeah. Incredible.
But Mexicans, it's not so easy.
No.
And it's very similar in many countries where it's easier to be an immigrant or a tourist than a citizen.
Well, America's the perfect one. You can never get away from paying taxes in America as a citizen.
Right.
But it's also the biggest tax haven on earth for non-Americans.
For everyone
which
else.
Is like, where's the freedom there? That's incredible.
It's high level hypocrisy, right?
Yeah.
But you can choose to be angry about it.
Yeah.
Or you can choose to take advantage of it.
Yeah.
Because being angry about it doesn't change anything. Taking advantage of it can save you a shitload of money.
For sure. For sure.
So, choose wisely.
Choose wisely. That's why they call you the sexiest man in tax. That's your title,
That's right.
isn't it?
That's right. Sexy tax guy. That's me.
Sexy tax guy. Because if you're saving $50,000, you
Or
start
more.
looking pretty good.
I got clients that say millions.
Yeah, wow.
Millions, yeah.
Well, what's the name of your company? How do people get in touch? If they're
that company, it's globalwealthprotection.com.
Okay, very cool. Very cool. And how did you get into all this tech? Because you are a lawyer. What's your background?
So, as a kid growing up, my dad he was always in business. And
your dad was an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Cool.
When I was born, he was a partner and the CFO of a large construction company.
Okay.
And then when I was small, really small, 3 or 4 years old or something, he sold out and started his own construction company with my oldest brother. And so they were doing construction, real estate development, a lot of real estate investing. So I was just around it. I was always around it. I was always around, my dad hated paying tax.
Sure.
He was an accountant by trade.
Uh-huh.
So, it was pretty common for us to have dinner table conversations about tax planning, company structure, and stuff.
As a child,
as a child, even 12 years old, I knew about company structure and tax planning and how to file taxes and all that stuff. Yeah.
Okay, so you had you grew up with that, and
I just grew up with it. I was very interested in investing in entrepreneurship. I started trading stocks when I was 14.
Okay.
I had a brokerage account. I had my own brokerage account when I was 14, trading stocks.
Wow, that's incredible.
So actually, I had a business law class in high school, and I'd been trading stocks for a couple of years at that point.
Yeah.
And my business law teacher came to me, and she's she came to the class to teach us like about stock investing,
Right.
and how to look at stocks and track stocks and how to analyze,
You
very
were
basic
taught that in
stuff.
high school.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was basic level.
Yeah,
It was
sure,
just basic
sure.
level, how to look at a P&L and do a few ratios and stuff like that, and how to track it. I mean, she was really into that stuff, and she was one of my favorite teachers. I still remember her. She was actually the mother of a friend of mine that I grew up with, so
That's cool.
really, really nice woman. And I told her I was already trading stocks and had been for a while. And she goes, bring me your brokerage account statement, and I'm curious to see what you trade and all that stuff. So I brought it in, and she's like, oh my God, you're making more money than I am trading. Like,
Really?
This is crazy. Like, how's this possible? You're like this, at the time, I guess then I was like 16 or 17.
Sure.
And she was like, this is crazy. But yeah, I mean, I was trading, investing.
Right. But you were doing quite well with it.
Pretty young. I mean, we're talking small numbers here,
Sure.
but still, the ratios were like
The ratios are good, right?
yeah,
right.
the percentages were pretty good. And I always had different businesses and stuff. Typical kid stuff like mowing lawns and that kind of thing.
That's very cool.
But yeah, never really had a real job.
No.
No.
But
I never had a corporate job. Never had anything like that. I just always had different companies.
Yeah, you were never an employee for somebody else.
I mean, I was, but I'm talking like bullshit jobs.
Yeah.
Like in high school, I started working when I was, I guess, 12 or 13.
Yeah.
In high school when I was a kid, and then I had like all the normal high school jobs. Like I unloaded trucks for UPS when I was 16.
Right.
I worked at a go-kart track. I worked at a grocery store.
Yeah.
Like stuff like that.
You did a lot actually.
Yeah.
And you were investing and everything. And so then when did
Mowing
you
yards, all that stuff.
Did you go to university to become a lawyer? Are you like a lawyer or what's your
So I went to university when I was 18, dropped out when I was 19,
Okay.
started a company that
Nice.
did fairly well, and then sold it, and I went back to university in my 30s.
Really? So wait, you dropped out 18 at 19.
19, yeah.
You started a company. What was that company?
So, well, that company, it was just like a sales thing.
Yeah.
And it flopped miserably.
Amazing.
And
Okay.
and then the next one, it flopped miserably. And I think there
Okay.
was one more in there that flopped miserably.
Okay.
And then when I was like 20 or 21 or something like that, I started a company that started doing fairly well. And it did, over time, it did fairly well. I mean, it took us like 3 years to hit $1 million in revenue. So, and then
That's pretty good.
yeah, it was all right. And then I built it up to maybe something between 7 and 8 million. We did
yearly revenue.
Huh?
Yearly revenue.
Yeah.
What were you selling? What were you doing?
So we were a service company. We were an installation company. So we started out doing bike assembly for Walmart. We assembled bicycles for Walmart.
That Walmart would sell ready-made bikes.
Yeah.
You would assemble
Walmart,
them.
and then Toys R Us, and
Sure.
a couple other department stores. And then got into doing similar thing like for home improvement stores like Home Depot and Lowe's, like assembling barbecues and some of their lawn equipment,
Yeah.
wooden structures, like these wooden playgrounds and stuff like that. We built a lot of those. And then we got into doing home installations for like sporting goods chains,
Sure.
like basketball goals, play equipment, like indoor and outdoor play equipment, like pool tables, ping pong tables, air hockey tables, outdoor stuff like playground equipment, and
Right.
stuff like that.
It's amazing. I've never even thought about that. It's a service that you could sell.
Well, yeah, we did. Yeah, we did. We did cover quite a lot of the U.S. on that, so I had quite a lot of employees and stuff.
Yeah.
But I sold that company. But during that whole time of owning that company, I had some other businesses too.
Yeah.
I was doing a bunch of real estate stuff. I had a restaurant in there that I bought and sold.
So you're just a serial entrepreneur, basically, just constantly.
Yeah, I guess. And during that time, though, like I started to like acquire assets, and I started thinking like, hey, you've got some assets, like you should probably start thinking about how to protect it and all that stuff.
Were you at that point? Were you always very low on your tax load? Were you always quite clever about not paying taxes, even in those
Yeah.
days? Yeah, you always knew.
Yeah.
That's from the childhood
Yeah.
table conversation.
Yeah, well, so actually, my dad had retired from he had sold. They did what's called an ESOP, or an employee stock ownership plan.
Mm-hmm.
So he actually sold his share of the company part of it to my brother, and then the rest of it to the employees of the company. So he had retired, and then he came to work as my CFO for a while.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so he helped a lot with the tax planning. And he was like CFO, but let's say like nowadays we would call it a fractional CFO. Right? He wasn't in the office full time, 40 hours a week like that. He just kind of oversaw things. I had a full-time controller, and then we had a pretty sizable regional like accounting firm, CPA firm that handled our stuff. But he kind of oversaw everything as kind of a fractional CFO, making sure our controller did everything right. And everything got transferred over to the accounting firm properly.
That's pretty cool that your dad was your CFO. That's quite nice.
It was okay for a while until I had to fire him.
Oh, you fired your dad?
Yeah, I had to fire him.
What happened going then?
He was causing some problems in like even with billing issues, and he actually caused a big billing issue in the company that I finally caught on to, and we almost lost a really big client because of it.
Right.
And let's say he's a pretty strong-willed person, and him and I had some philosophical differences, let's call it, and it become quite a bit of friction between him and I from some philosophical views on how to run things.
Right.
And then he started causing like legitimate problems, costing us money.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I gotta let you go.
Yeah.
This is not working.
Gee, that's a tough conversation.
It was fine. I mean, he was fractional CFO.
Yeah.
It wasn't like he was
That invested in the company.
He wasn't so invested in
No.
it. He was like, no, okay, whatever, you know. And I just basically got somebody else in there, and I ended up promoting the controller and still did with the CPA.
One thing that really interests me is you said you were an entrepreneur from 19 to your early 30s or whatever, and then you went back to school. Like you sold your business
just for fun.
You made money. You went to school for fun, which to me sounds like the worst thing I can imagine. So maybe elaborate upon how that could possibly be fun.
I just thought it would be kind of fun, kind of interesting to go back and learn the things I wanted to learn, without having the pressure to do them for any particular reason.
Right.
So, I mean, at that point when I went back to school, I was already doing, early 30s.
Yeah.
But I was already doing what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
At that point.
Right. But how could what were you studying? What topics, like tax law and stuff?
No, so I'm talking bachelor's, this bachelor's degree.
Okay.
So it was kind of funny because, did you go to university?
No, and when you say bachelor's and all that stuff to me is just like, I didn't want any part of any of it.
Gotcha.
So I don't.
So, bachelor's is like your undergraduate 4-year degree or whatever.
That's the most minimal accreditation. Okay.
Yeah. So, I went just to take the courses I wanted to take.
Sure.
So I had gone to university for about 1.5 years when I was 18 until I was 19. So I had 3 semesters. I dropped out. But the cool thing is in the U.S. you have, this is not cool, but in the U.S. you have all these bullshit courses you have to take, which are completely meaningless to you. You know, you got to learn like it's so dumb, like Western civilization, classical history, stuff like that. You're like, this is literally like I could read a couple of books and have this information. I don't need a course for this.
Yeah.
I need to learn macroeconomics, or I want to learn accounting, or I want to learn, derivatives trading or something.
But you can learn that from a couple of books as well.
Yeah, you can. But I did it just for fun.
Yeah.
But the cool thing is, because I went to school when I was 18, 19, those credits still transferred.
Okay.
It was a little bit of a motivation for me, because if I waited 1 more year to go back to university, they would not have transferred.
Right.
Because the credits die or expire or whatever. But I could use the credits And that allowed me to not have to take the bullshit courses in university anymore.
Right.
So then it made it more appealing for me to do university because I could take only the courses I was interested in learning.
Yeah.
And so I went back to university. And, you have to pick a major. You're like, okay, what do you want to major in? So I picked international business. Mm-hmm. And, so you didn't go to university, so you may not understand this, but basically you have what's called a student advisor.
Okay.
And the advisor helps you pick your courses and analyze, helps you strategically pick the right courses so that you can, you're optimizing everything to get your degree.
Sure.
Okay? And I'm like 30 something years old. I just sold a company.
Yeah.
I had consulting clients. I'm trading. I also do some options trading.
You're not the average student.
Right. I mean, I made more money trading. Just my trading income was more than the dean of the university.
Yeah.
At the time, right?
Sure.
And I'm like early 30s. I don't remember, 32, 3, something like that, right?
About my age.
And so I had a student advisor who was this like 25-year-old master student girl.
Uh-huh.
And she was German, German girl, and she was so focused on getting that degree and taking the right courses to get that degree, right? And so I remember her name was Heidi.
Yeah.
And so I would go
Shout out to Heidi.
Yeah. What up, Heidi? I don't remember her last name though. Sure. But I remember meeting with Heidi, and she would get so frustrated with me because she would be like, "Okay, Bobby, this semester you need to take this, and this. You need to take these 5 courses, or 6, or whatever." And I would say, "I don't really want to take those. And I'd go through the course schedule, and I just did it myself. And I'm like, I really want to take, this, real estate investing and derivatives trading and macroeconomics and so on." And she'd say, "Well, if you take all those courses, some of those are not really required as part of your degree.
Yeah.
And then it's going to take you longer to finish school, and it'll take you longer to get your degree."
Right.
And I would say, "So? Okay." Yeah. And she's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Well, I don't really care." She goes, "What do you mean you don't care? Like, it'll take you longer to get your degree, and then if it takes you longer to get your degree, then it's going to take you longer for you to get a job." And I'm like, whoa. I said, "Heidi, let's get something straight here just so you understand who you're talking to. I am never fucking getting a job. I will this is a hard no for me. I'm never fucking getting a job.
Yeah.
That is not going to be my thing." She goes, "What do you mean you're not getting a job?" I'm like, "Heidi, listen, I don't mean to be rude or anything, but like, I make more working 1 or 2 hours a day than the dean of the university makes. Yeah. I don't need a job. I don't have a need for that. Yeah. It's not anything."
No, it doesn't make any sense.
It makes 0 sense for me to get a job.
Yeah.
She goes, "But why are you going to school then?" I'm like, "For fun." And she was like,
I mean, I feel the same. But
she was like, she couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
So long story short, what happened was I took all the courses I wanted, but because of that, it did take me a bit longer.
Sure.
But I ended up getting 2 degrees with 2 minors.
Okay.
So I ended, kind of by default, only because I had all the extra courses, and when you added it all up, I was eligible, so I did double degrees with double minors.
Right. Okay.
So I ended up with a bachelor's in international business with a minor in Russian language, and then a bachelor's in finance.
You speak Russian as well?
A little bit.
Okay.
And then I have and then also a bachelor's in finance with a minor in economics.
Yeah.
And so at the end, Heidi was just like, it made her fucking crazy. Because every semester you have to go meet with your advisor like once or twice a semester. And she couldn't handle it that I wasn't doing this to get a job.
That's amazing.
Like, it was just
she couldn't handle the narrative. You just broke her narrative.
Yeah, it just broke her. Like, she was in such a narrow frame of reference. Yeah. This is how somebody has to live. I'm like, that's not how I live. That's not me.
But most people in the university have that frame of reference. That's why I never wanted to go, because it's all that nonsense. If you have to do this to then get a job, and like, what's like?
Absolutely. Yeah. I agree. And I would say, if you were like 18 or 19 years old, man, going to university is probably a pretty shitty thing to do.
Yeah.
Like,
Right. I agree. Thank you.
Because let's be honest, at 18 or 19, you're still pretty weak-minded.
Sure.
You're very susceptible to easily be programmed.
Yeah.
And if you go straight into that university program, straight out of high school, I mean, you're going to get programmed.
Oh, for sure. They teach you what to think.
We all get programmed.
Of course.
We're all programmed. Right? You can call it brainwashing, you can call it programming, you can call it what you want. Well, everyone is programmed. The thing is, you can choose your programming,
Yeah.
or you can passively accept your programming.
Yes.
And most people, most kids, 18 years old, their parents push them,
Yeah.
go to university,
Yeah.
get the good job, all that. We passively accept the university programming,
Yeah.
and then you absorb it, whether you want to or not. And that can change dramatically based on where you go to university too.
Mhm.
You can have a completely different experience going to, a university here versus here based on like the core ideologies taught
Yeah.
at those two different universities.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? I mean, I've seen people who were like maybe completely conservative-minded people go to a liberal arts school and come out like completely flip their
15
script,
deep.
right?
Yeah, for sure.
15 genders. They come out of they, right? They roll out of there as a they. They go in as rednecks and they come out as a they.
It's true. It's so powerful when all day, every day, you're being taught what to think. I mean, that's why I was so against university and any sort of structured education, and became an autodidact and taught myself. I mean, I was against guitar teachers because I thought they were going to steal my artistic soul by programming. I wanted to learn just through my ears,
So I think you're still kind of weak-minded at 18 and easily susceptible to this level of programming. So it's probably a really bad idea for most 18-year-old kids. Now, depends on the kid, right? If you were a very mature teenager, you knew what you wanted in life, and you're like, I know, I want to be a doctor.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely going to be a doctor.
Yeah.
Then obviously it's dumb for you to wait until your 30s to go to school to be a doctor. Because even if you go straight into school out of high school to be a doctor, let's be honest, you don't even make money till you're 40.
No, you're in debt for so long.
It takes you at least till your 40s till you make any money.
Yeah.
Because you don't even really make a paycheck till you're almost 30.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And then you've got a mountain of debt that you got to spend the next 10 years paying off. And then you can make a killing after you're 40 if you're the right kind of doctor. But if you're that kind of person who knows absolutely, and you're a mature, responsible teen coming out and you have that plan in place, great. But if you're like, I don't know what to do. Oh my God, maybe university could fuck your brain up more than anything.
Yeah, for sure.
Go see the world. Go work.
So bring me back though. So you did finish university. You got 2 degrees.
In my 30s.
Yeah.
And then later on I went to law school.
And then you went to law. So you are like an accredited lawyer. You are a lawyer.
I never passed the bar. I never.
Okay. So you don't need to be a lawyer to advise on tax and company structure.
No, anybody can do it that knows what they're talking about.
Right.
That's not even why I did it. That has nothing to do with why I went to law school. It's just it's consulting. I can consult on. I can't because I don't know. I'm not good at it. But in theory, I can consult on marketing. I don't need a degree in marketing to consult on marketing. Sure. You can consult on, you can consult on diet and nutrition too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there are degrees for being a nutritionist.
Yeah.
You don't need to be one.
But I'm allowed to give you advice.
Right.
Yeah.
Would you take diet and nutrition advice from me?
I don't know, Bobby.
I would hope not. I would hope not, right? It's kind of like if you go see, this is a complete side topic, but I would absolutely take diet and nutrition advice from a 50-year-old dude who's never gone to university, who is healthy and fit,
Yeah, of course.
right? But I would never hire a 23-year-old fat yoga teacher.
No way. Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Okay? I don't care what her accreditation is to be a yoga teacher. I'm not hiring a fat yoga teacher. I'm just not going to do it.
I ain't gonna do it.
I don't care because she doesn't practice what she preaches. Whereas the 50-year-old dude
Yeah.
who has maybe had some ups and downs in his life and has sorted out over decades how to be healthy, he knows his shit. He didn't need a degree to do that.
No, of course not.
So it's the same thing. Like I can't represent you in court. I can't put the gown on and represent you in court. No.
Yes.
But I can draft documents. I can
Yes.
advise you on legal matters. I can
Yes.
teach how to structure a company.
Yeah.
You know.
And when did you? So you grew up in America. You grew up in North Carolina.
I did, yeah.
When did you become a digital nomad and all of that? I mean, you live now in Latvia, which is also quite a rare choice, I guess. There aren't many Americans living in Latvia.
There's like 8 of us.
Do you guys have a club? You get together?
We do. We have our own club. And I intentionally not part of it because I don't want to hang out with those Americans. Well, I started traveling a lot in early mid 2000s.
After you finished university and all that, as a grown man.
I really don't remember when I
What
graduated.
did
No. I graduated. I find it was like, what year is this? So it was around 2009.
Okay.
Or somewhere around 2009 is when
You were born in 74.
when I finished the school stuff.
35 or so.
Yeah, it's around 2009-ish. I think I finished the school stuff. Now I
You started traveling. Were you working as you were traveling?
yeah.
Yeah. So.
I was traveling a lot. Well, for my installation business, I was traveling a lot in the U.S.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
I mean, because we were doing business all over the U.S. I had employees all over the U.S.
Yeah.
I was traveling a lot for that. And I'm always the kind of person that I don't think my entire life is built around doing my job.
No.
So if I traveled somewhere for work, I would make it fun.
Yeah.
Also, like I would go to Utah, for example, for work.
Mhm.
Like we had a bunch of clients around Salt Lake City area, but I would always stay a few extra days and do some outdoorsy
Enjoy it.
stuff and
Yeah.
stuff like that. You know, we had a huge client in Denver, Colorado. I would always spend a few extra days doing outdoorsy stuff in Colorado, that kind of thing. So I traveled a lot for work, but also kind of added a enjoyable component to work travel. And then I traveled quite a bit internationally too, starting around probably mid 2000s. I was spending some time in Europe and a lot of time in Russia.
Right. Yeah, you like Russia. You like the language.
I do. I don't know why. No.
There's a lot of Americans that.
I think I grew up watching all the Bond movies, James Bond movies, and the bad guys were always like Bond villains, or like the Bond villains were always like Russians, and you know somehow that appealed to me. I think I don't know. Maybe it was the Bond women that were Russians or something. Maybe that was the appealing
Very
part.
sexy.
I don't know, but yeah, just kind of appealing to me. I had no background or anything there. Just,
No heritage, nothing. Just
no.
There's a few Americans here on the Nomad Cruise that are like learning Russian and all that. Like it's kind of a thing that I've noticed.
I don't know. Just kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, then I moved like full time, moved abroad in 2009.
Yeah, you went to
Estonia.
Estonia, which you told me. I asked you why, and you said why not.
Yep, that's exactly it.
Why you just put your finger on the map and said fuck it. Here we go.
I talked to a friend of mine who had lived in Estonia before,
Right.
and she was like, "Yeah, it's a cool place. You'd like it there." I'm like,
Done.
"Cool, sounds
I'm moving
interesting."
tomorrow. Let's
All right,
go.
let's go. I mean, it wasn't tomorrow, but it
Yeah.
was like a couple months. It
Yeah,
was a couple
because you
months.
just wanted to get out of the States.
I just wanted something different, change of pace.
Yeah.
I'd sold my company.
Yeah.
I had the degree in Russian. I had the Russian language background. I thought it would be interesting to go somewhere in Eastern Europe to practice speaking Russian. Of course, little did I know, I showed up in Estonia, and Estonians hate speaking Russian.
Yeah, they know it, but they don't like to speak it.
They'll speak Russian to you if you're a Russian speaker. But if you're not a Russian speaker, they'll default to English.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Which is kind of funny. I had a taxi driver in Thailand one time. I was speaking to him in Russian, and he told me in Russian to not speak to him in Russian. I was like, okay, English it is then, and we switched to English. Like, he was actually offended that I spoke to him in Russian. I'm like, well, I don't speak Estonian, so I would try Russian. He goes, I don't want to speak Russian. Speak to me in English. I'm like, okay, bro, got it.
Okay.
So it was kind of interesting. But yeah, moved there and just kind of liked the Baltic region.
Yeah.
And then ended up a couple of years later in Latvia, and I've had a home base there since 2011.
Oh, gee, that's a long time. 12 years. It's very cool. Very cool.
Had a home base there since 2011. I lived in a bunch of different places.
But you still run quite a fairly big company.
I have 3 businesses.
Yeah.
I have the one we talked about earlier, like consultations, tax, asset protection planning.
What was it called?
Global Wealth Protection.
Global Wealth Protection.
GlobalWealthProtection.com.
Yeah.
That
Business everywhere.
Yeah, Business Anywhere.
Anywhere.
BusinessAnywhere.io. We are a registered agent and company formation service in the U.S. We do registered agent and company formation services in all 50 states. We have a virtual mailbox service. We open bank accounts for clients, especially non-U.S. people. Tax filings, notary service, stuff like that. Kind of a business owner toolbox kind of thing. And,
I'll probably be using that, to be honest.
And then we have a trusted corporate service company in the Caribbean, trusts and offshore companies and trusts.
And you run all of that remotely, all your employees?
Well, basically, all my team is all over. We're spread out all over the world. Cool. Now, in the Caribbean, in Anguilla, we do have an office there because we have a legal requirement to have an office. So I have a director of the company that's there that is responsible for that office. Now, as far as being in the office, probably almost never, I'm guessing. But we have to have one. It is a legal requirement that we have something there because we do get spot audits by the regulators there, so they can literally send us a letter or an email or whatever and say, hey, we're coming by in 5 days to review these 5 records. It's just spot audit. So we have to have an office for them to physically appear, and we show them file folders. It's silly, but Do you
have any tips on how to be audited? What's good? What to do when you get audited?
Like a tax audit?
Yeah. Or how to avoid getting audited at all?
Well, you're in Serbia. I'd say it's a pretty low probability. In Serbia.
Low.
Yeah.
That's why I'm a patriot.
Yeah, I'd say it's a pretty low probability. Now, in Australia, you had a much higher probability, but if you've exited Australia and you've deregistered and disconnected from the ATO, then once you disconnect, you're all good. Now, I have a lot of clients, Australian clients, that think they can just take a plane out of Australia and they're disconnected. That's not really the case. There's some additional things you have to do there. If you haven't done those things, then you could be at risk for fraud. And the big problem there is usually if you're not there, maybe you don't hear anything from them. But if you decide 8 years later you want to go back and settle down and have the white picket fence life in Sydney, you might end up with a really nasty surprise when you decide to move back. All of a sudden you owe $1 million in tax or something.
And then what? Can you go to jail for not paying taxes? Do people go to jail for stuff
in Australia? I don't know in Australia. I'm not sure. Most countries
in America.
In America, yeah.
You go to jail for a lot of things in America.
You can go to jail for not paying tax in the U.S. Depends on which type of tax.
Yeah.
The big one that causes people problems in the U.S. is payroll tax. That's the biggest one. So if you have employees and you withhold payroll tax and you're supposed to pay that on their behalf, then you can go to jail for not paying payroll tax for your employees. I actually bought a company.
Go to jail for not paying payroll tax.
I actually bought a company once from a competitor who was about to go to jail for non-payment of his payroll tax.
Amazing.
Like for real.
Yeah.
The guy owed $186,000 in tax to the IRS, payroll tax.
And you go to jail for that amount? That doesn't seem like that much money.
He was about to go to jail.
Wow.
And basically he had a gambling addiction.
Okay.
And so he thought he was really good at gambling, sports betting mainly for him.
Amazing.
And he was taking so you can float payroll tax, okay? You only have to pay it every quarter. So what he was doing is, every pay period, like every 2 weeks, you take the money, but you only pay it every 3 months, right?
Yeah.
So he was carrying this float of payroll tax in his account.
Right.
And he had this bright idea that he was going to go take and bet his payroll, like he had all this money on payroll tax, he was going to use it to go bet on, I don't remember, basketball games or horses or I don't know, some kind of sports betting. And he thought he was going to go bet it and he lost it. And then he lost it again. And then he lost it again. And then he lost it again. And then he was fucked.
Yeah. And you came in and bought the company.
So we had already talked probably 2 years earlier. I offered it's a funny story. His name was Tim. I offered to buy the company from him. He told me to fuck off. He literally told me those words, fuck off, I'm not selling shit to you. And, we were competitors, we were pretty fierce competitors.
Yeah.
And he told me to fuck off. And then he came to me, and he literally just randomly, out of the blue one day, I got a phone call on my cell phone. And it was him. And he was like, hey, you still interested in buying my company?
Right.
I'm like, sure. Tell me about it. So he told me the revenue, it wasn't a big company, a few $100,000.
A month or a year?
A year.
Yeah.
I want to say like $600,000 or $700,000 a year.
Okay.
Like $50,000 a month, basically.
Okay.
In revenue. And I'm like, okay. And I basically know the profit margin because we were in the same kind of business. And said, okay.
What was the business? What were they doing?
They were a competitor of mine in the installation business. They did all the installations for a lot of Home Depots in the region, like the barbecues and all that stuff.
Okay.
And
so he offers to sell it to you because he's desperate.
He was very desperate.
He's going to go to jail.
He was absolutely going to prison.
But if you buy the company, he doesn't go to jail anymore because he can pay the debt?
Because he took the money and paid the tax.
Wow. That's just so crazy.
So he owed $186,000 in payroll tax, and he was about to go to prison.
Yeah.
He had already been indicted, and he had criminal court coming up, and if he didn't pay the bill before that came up, it was...
So he just needed to raise money to not go to jail, basically.
Yes. Yeah. And so he called me up. He literally called me up. I said, what's your revenue? He told me.
Yeah.
And, literally, this was like a 30-minute conversation, and he told me, he said, $186,000. He told me the whole story.
He told you everything? Wow.
Everything.
He gave you all the leverage.
Huh?
He gave you a lot of leverage doing that.
Yeah. Well, he was in a desperate situation. Yeah. And I told him right there on the phone, in a 30-minute phone call, I said, look, I want to verify your numbers. I want to see your bank statements. I want to see your tax returns, all that stuff. I want to see your invoice statements with Home Depot. Home Depot was mainly his client.
Sure.
And I want to see your invoice statements with Home Depot. And I want to talk to 2 of your key employees. If everything checks out, I'll give you $200,000 next week.
Wow. For the whole business.
Yeah. I said, this is, and I said, here's the caveat there. You get me all those documents in the next 2 days, I'll get you the money next week. But here's the deal. This is a final offer.
Yeah.
We're not negotiating anymore. You don't go talk to anybody else. If you literally have one conversation with one other person, deal's off the table. That's it. We're done.
Wow.
I don't give a fuck. I'll let you go to jail. And I said, I'll just take your clients from you when you're in prison.
Yeah.
I said, so...
Can you continue running your company in jail? Like, is that even possible?
He maybe was able to because his brother worked for him.
Right.
But his brother wasn't that smart.
No. It also seems quite
So I think
crazy.
it probably wouldn't have worked that well.
Like, what's the logic from the American government? They're like, throw him in jail. How can he pay his debt off in jail? How long do you go to jail for, by the way, for that amount of money?
I don't know.
Yeah. It
I don't know
doesn't
if
seem
it's
like
gonna-
that much money. I thought you go to jail if you're like, I don't know, 10 million or something. But 200 grand is, yeah, it's a lot of money. It's not that much to go to jail
It's not
for.
that much, yeah. I mean, I know another guy right now.
But he did take the offer.
Yeah.
You gave him an offer.
And he
couldn't
and he
refuse.
worked for me until I sold the company.
And you sold it again.
Yeah.
How much did you sell it for?
I'm not disclosing
No,
numbers.
fair enough, fair enough.
I actually ended up selling to another competitor, though.
Yeah, wow.
I
See,
was
that
just-
must have been a bruise to his ego working for you after telling you to fuck off.
Yeah, I think it kind of was at first, but he settled in. It was fine.
Yeah.
We got to be pretty good friends and everything.
It's good, actually.
I mean, I haven't seen him since I sold the company, but if I was in town and he called me up and said, "Hey, let's go grab a coffee," I would go hang out with him.
That's cool. That's cool.
If he's still alive.
Well, if
He may not be alive because like, he smoked like 3 packs of cigarettes a day.
Yeah.
And he, at times he was a heavy drinker. I like, he could have died of lung cancer or,
yeah.
I don't know, liver failure or something at this point, the way he was living. But
Yeah.
or who knows, maybe he's in prison for some other tax thing. Yeah, he was a mess, but I mean, he turned out to be a good employee. He just was not very good at running a business because he couldn't.
He was a
Because
gambler.
he was a gambler,
Yeah.
and that temptation to, like, he had all that money sitting in the account, staring
Yeah.
him in the face, and he
Couldn't deal with
he
it.
had a gamble. They say like with addicts, gambling is the hardest addiction to break.
Really?
Yeah.
Right.
If you talk to like addicts and people that like deal with addicts, helping them like overcome addiction, they say gambling is the hardest one to break because it's all psychological and it's like physical addiction is one thing, but psychological, man, it's tough to break.
One more thing I wanted to get into. You told me off air this was quite boring, but I think it's quite an interesting question. Just kind of the philosophy of law in and of itself, like
Philosophy of what?
of law.
Oh, of law.
Like you have civil law and common law. So law is broken in this world that we live in. There are 2 types of legal systems.
Generally
essentially.
speaking, yeah.
Common law and civil law. And like, how does someone like from a lay perspective with some interest in this, what's the best way for me to try to understand the difference between the 2?
Honestly, I don't. For the common person, I don't know that this even matters.
Yeah.
It's like it's not really an issue. Like I tried to explain before when we were offline, like there are certain nuances there, like in a common law legal system, legal precedents are really, really important. Court cases that happened before are really, really important. Whereas in a civil law legal system, statutes or like formalized
What's written down
law, what's written down
is correct and this
Yeah.
is wrong. Yes.
It is very, very important in civil law. There's obviously some crossover there,
Sure.
but generally, if you go fight a legal case in a civil law legal system, you cite statute after statute after statute after statute to make your defense. In a common law legal system, you would typically cite other similar cases that had the outcome that you desired.
Yeah. No, I think that's an incredible answer.
So
That's
it's just a nuance, but for most people it doesn't make a difference. There are some things like we were discussing from the trust concept when it comes to trusts. A trust is a legal contract where you put somebody in charge of your assets and your estate. It's a very old type structure. It's British common law, goes back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And it's a common thing. Trust law is very common in the UK and all of your British Commonwealth countries, like former British Commonwealth countries like Canada, the US, Australia, New Zealand, places like that. All your Caribbean countries or the British Overseas Territory, stuff like that. So it's very common, and a trust is a little bit different entity because it's not a legalized entity, it's a contract between two or more parties. Whereas in a civil law legal system, if you want the equivalent structure to a trust, you need to do something what's called a private interest foundation. But trusts are not really recognized in a civil law legal system because they don't recognize that type of contractual agreement.
Yeah.
They need like the statute where there's actually a registered entity that's registered in that jurisdiction.
Right.
A trust is not a registered entity. It's a contract between two or more parties. A private interest foundation it's like a company. It's a registered company with the registry.
Yeah.
So there is a statute that says, here is how a private interest foundation functions and how it's registered and how it's operated and that sort of thing. So it's just that's like a minor nuance. Like there are, if you Serbian, for example, you would probably, if you wanted that sort of thing, if you wanted to create a structure to protect your assets from future potential litigation, or you want to protect your estate and make it easy to pass down to heirs. In Serbia, you would not do a trust because Serbia is a civil law jurisdiction. Yeah. Whereas if you were in Australia, you would do a trust.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
So in your case, you would need to choose, because you could choose. You really could choose. And even more so, like I have a lot of clients that they live in civil law jurisdictions, but we created trust for them because our trust company, it's a former British, or it's a what you call British Overseas Territory. So it's a common law legal jurisdiction. So you can still do a trust.
A civil law country will respect a common law agreement from another country.
That's
interesting.
But you can't do it in that country.
Yeah. Okay.
Like if you were, let's say you were sued for $10 million in Serbia.
Yeah.
And you said, no, I got a trust in Anguilla.
Yeah.
Then they couldn't touch your assets because legally they're owned by a trust in Anguilla. They would have to respect that because of the ownership rights are owned by a trust in Anguilla. Right. And so then if whoever was suing you, your claimant was coming after you, they would have to go to Anguilla and sue you there or try to sue you there.
Right.
Okay.
To get after the money.
Whereas if you were in Serbia and you wanted an entity in Serbia, there is no such thing as a trust. I'd have to look. Like in theory, you could do a private interest foundation in Serbia if it's something that like is offered.
Sure.
Not every civil law country offers it. It's actually a structure that came about probably around 70 years ago in Liechtenstein, because Liechtenstein was an upcoming financial hub in Europe for wealthy Europeans, but it's a civil law jurisdiction, and they wanted something similar to a trust, and so they created the concept of a private interest foundation.
Okay.
That's where it came from.
Very interesting. And I mean, the trust and the private, what do you call it? The
private interest foundation.
PIF. Private interest foundation. I mean, they're basically just instruments used to evade taxes legally. Is that a correct way of looking at it?
No. A trust or a foundation is typically tax neutral in most cases. It's more for estate planning and asset protection.
Okay. Learning about this.
There are maybe some possibilities, like, for example, if you want to shift assets of a company out of your name into a trust so that you don't own it, and so that you don't have, we discussed CFC rules earlier. Like, I mean, again, this is just a general concept. I'm not saying this is doable or not, because, I mean, I'd have to look at the statutes in Germany. But if you were German and didn't want to fall under CFC rules, maybe you could create a private interest foundation to own the majority of your company in a different jurisdiction so that you avoid CFC income tax on a controlled foreign corporation in another jurisdiction. So there are maybe some situations where you could use it like that for tax purposes, but generally speaking, those things are used for estate planning and like estate planning and asset protection.
Yeah.
I do love the sounds of the city. We're gonna have the sound of the city in the background.
Sounds of Salvador. I was wondering what that was.
Sounds of Salvador, some street car alarm. Hey, I did an interview for my YouTube channel a few days ago, and on the boat, on the cruise ship,
Yeah.
and there was a guy that literally popped into our video and just yelled, "Down to the Anglo-Saxons," and then he just walked away.
Amazing.
Completely drunk guy just popped into
Just
our
wasted.
podcast. I told my video editor, I said, keep that in there.
Yeah, for sure.
Because that was amazing. I love it.
Yeah, that cannot be planned. That's
Yeah,
incredible.
there's no way that could have been planned.
So one more question I had for you, a deep question. You're an anarchist.
Oh,
Not,
okay, here we go.
Are you ready to?
We're digging into anarchy. huh?
I'm ready to go deep, man. I like going deep, and you're a deep thinker, and I think your thoughts are worth sharing, and I'm chewing on them.
All right.
I'm thinking about what you think. Tell
Okay.
me.
All right, what's the question?
Well, I guess the question is, I mean, you understand legal systems deeply more so than most people. What do you think governments do not have a right to exist? Are governments illegal entities, or do you recognize governments, or what? How do you define anarchism? What is your general philosophy upon that
Well,
word, let's say?
Anarchy, simply put, is just no rulers, no
Yeah.
centralized authority,
Yeah.
no rulers. I don't think humanity has a need for centralized authority anymore. You can call it government or you can call it whatever you want, but I don't think we have any need for it anymore. I think we've evolved beyond it. Now, I could argue also that we never needed it,
Yeah.
but that's kind of like, that's a moot point, right? I mean, we've had it. So
Yeah.
we
It's
could,
not going to go away anytime soon.
right, we could philosophically argue that government was never needed and should never have existed
Yeah.
and all that stuff. But that's just like that's just a silly thought experiment because government has existed.
Yeah.
I mean, government's really been around since shortly after the advent of agriculture.
Yeah. But who would be enforcing, let's say you have a trust agreement in Anguilla, you're living in Latvia. Is it not up to the government to enforce the validity of that contract? Or how would you have that in a non-governmental system? Say the whole world had no government. So how would you protect agreements between private individuals?
So I'll recommend a book for you to read,
Yeah.
and then we'll discuss it.
Okay.
I think it's a pretty interesting book. It's pretty old. It was written in the early 70s.
Okay.
It's called A Market for Liberty.
Okay.
It was a couple that wrote it. Their last name is Tannenhill, but I forgot their first names. I haven't read it in a few years.
A Market for Liberty.
A Market for Liberty.
All right,
Yeah.
I'll write it down.
It's not a big book, but it's really interesting, and it talks about how the world would function in absence of a centralized authority. And I put a lot of thought into this, and that book also helped clarify some of my ideas and thoughts on it too. Now, a lot of what we already do now today, we already live in anarchy the vast majority of our lives.
Yes.
The majority of the things we do without the consent, permission, or rule of a centralized authority. You make all of your decisions based on various factors. Almost none of them are based on having a centralized authority now. So I think it's interesting when people say anarchy would never work. Well, right now, anarchy works for 95% of your decision making.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's true.
So the question is, can we do without the other 5%? And I also want to clarify something. I don't think anarchy is like this magical utopia where we're all like farting rainbows and everything.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think it's going to be perfection because central authority, no central authority, that the common thread there is we're still humans.
Yeah.
So people say, but if we had no anarchy, we would have gangs in the street. Well, we have gangs in the street anyway.
Yeah, Salvador's full of them.
We have gangs in the street anyway with government. You could also just argue that the government itself is gangs in the street.
They are. They just have a monopoly on being the legitimate gang.
Why do they have the monopoly on it?
Because they have the gun. They have the power.
They have the guns.
They rule. It's not even the guns.
It goes a little bit
They've
deeper.
constructed a way to rule over us. We've acquiesced.
Do you know what it is?
Authority to them. Go on.
Do you know what it is?
What do you call it?
Central banking.
Uh-huh.
So they're the one that control the money supply.
Yeah.
Right? So they control the money supply. They also have the most guns, the biggest guns, the most powerful guns, the warships, the F-35s and all that stuff, right? So, you can argue, I've got guns too. Well, great, you've got guns. I mean, I got guns at my place in North Carolina, and what am I going to do? I'm going to hold off the National Guard with a shotgun and a couple of pistols. They've got fucking tanks.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I'm not going to hold off.
But they also, having political power isn't just about having the most guns. It's getting people to acquiesce to you and to respect that authority, basically. That's what it's about. And that's not necessarily from violence.
It is from the threat of violence.
That's an aspect of it, but it's not the only one.
I think it's the fundamental thing.
It's definitely one of the fundamental things. But I think there's more to power than just violence.
Government does, well, some governments, not all. Some governments do, I hate to even say it like this because I don't mean it in a good way, but good from their perspective.
Yeah.
Some governments do a good job of making you believe government is necessary.
Oh, they love it in Australia. They love
propaganda.
It. Yeah.
A lot of governments do a really good job of propaganda, making you believe that you need it. Like, I'll give you a great example of this. Okay, I'll give you a great example. Propaganda is so prevalent in the United States. Have you ever watched a football game, an NFL football game?
Once, I think.
Okay. But you've watched one.
Sure.
Okay, you know what it is. You've seen one. So at the beginning of every football game, if you were an American, obviously you would know this like this.
Yeah, the national anthem.
Yep.
Yeah.
National anthem. At the beginning of every football game, they sing the national anthem. Okay? Do you have any idea why they sing the national anthem?
Go on. Unpack it.
The biggest financial, or one of the biggest financial supporters of the National Football League is the U.S. Army. And it's in their contract that they have to play the national anthem at the beginning of games. Why do we want to play the national anthem? Because you've got dads and little boys sitting there watching football games every Sunday or Monday or whenever football plays.
Yeah.
And so now we're back to the programming. You're programming the little boys to become soldiers and to hero worship soldiers and to be patriotic, right?
Yeah.
Patriotism is a religion,
yes.
right? It is a type of religion. We are conditioned to believe that. Like, if you take all of that out of context and if you tell somebody this crazy story, like, well, here's what I want you to do. I want you to grow up. When you turn 18, when you're still really young and naive about the world, what I want you to do is get on a giant airplane and go over to the other side of the world, and I want you to kill brown people for oil.
Yeah, it's madness.
You'll be like, what the fuck? That's the dumbest shit I've ever heard. Of course I don't want to do that. No. Right? But if you sit there and play the national anthem for them every week, and you condition them for years and years to believe the hero is going to that other part of the world to protect what is the life and culture of the greatest country on earth, and to spread freedom and democracy and patriotism across the world. It's a different story.
It's a completely different narrative.
Right? It's a completely different story. The result is exactly the same thing, right? Yeah. We go over there and we blow up brown people in tents for oil. Yeah. Right? The result is exactly the same, but it's the narrative that gets told. And so
of course.
This is what you're talking about. It is the propaganda that conditions us to believe over time the government is good, the military is good,
It's non-stop. It's all day. I mean,
Politicians
even
want
at
us.
school, they always make you do the national anthem as well. I mean, in Australia at least, surely in America it's the same.
Yeah, you
do
have to
the
stand up
national
and do
anthem
it.
and all that stuff, and all the public holidays. They're all there to condition you to accept the government's.
I
as a
can do it right
legitimate-
now. I mean, I can do it right now because I had to do it every day in school for 12 years. I still have it in my brain. I can do it right now.
Yeah. It's still in there. You
Like,
can't get rid of
I
it.
pledge allegiance to the flag.
Yeah, to the-
Like I can do this whole thing, like right?
Yeah, for sure.
Because we're programmed
For sure.
to believe it, and so
And so you acknowledge that as a religion. We were talking off camera as well,
But anyway, anarchy, I think,
Yeah.
is just recognizing the absence of no rulers. We don't need rulers to organize how we live our lives. Like, there's just silly things. Like, I make silly examples here. Imagine you've got this neighborhood. Let's say you got a developer. I'm talking about in an anarchist society. You got a developer that builds a neighborhood. There's 100 houses or 500 houses or whatever in this neighborhood. And now, over here, on 5 kilometers away, another developer built a shopping center, a shopping mall with a grocery store and a clothing store and electronics and all the normal things you want to buy and need, right? 5 kilometers away. Now, the common argument for people are like, yeah, but we can't have anarchy. Who would build the roads?
Mm-hmm.
Who would build the roads? Who would build the roads? My roads, right? My thought is, if you have a developer that builds the housing community with people here and a shopping center over here, I feel like humans are smart enough to figure out how to get from point A to point B without having the government build a road for them.
No, the roads
I think
argument.
it would happen.
The roads argument is the fucking most ridiculous one because you end up paying for the fucking roads again and again with the paying the tolls, then you pay for parking. It's like none of that shit's free anyway. You're still getting smashed.
Well, so ironically, the majority in most countries, roads and infrastructure development is funded by fuel tax. Which is a consumption
and you pay
tax.
fuel tax as well. So.
Which is a consumption tax that you pay when you choose to get in your car and drive. Or you choose to get on a plane and fly. Or you choose to get in a bus that drives. Or you get in a taxi or an Uber or whatever. You actively choose to pay that fuel tax by engaging in that service, right? So it is a consumption tax, and those things are paid for, by that fuel tax. That sort of thing, there is a way to manage that in a privatized system without a centralized authority.
Yeah, of course.
Ultimately, it comes down to this. So I mentioned it before, is government exists because of threat of violence.
Yeah.
There is some underlying threat of violence or of some negative consequence. Maybe not physical violence, but stealing my house or seizing my property or seizing my car or freezing my bank accounts. Maybe that's not physically violent, but it is still a sort of violence against you.
It's definitely violence.
And that's the fear that government uses to maintain its power. Part of it is propaganda, but part of it is fear. Kind of like, look at it like this. In your business, as a software developer, you don't have any clients unless you build a good product. You build a good product, they pay you for the product. At some point, they value that product equal to or more than the amount of money you paid them, or they paid you, sorry, right? So there is a value exchange there.
Of course.
But in government, there's not really a value exchange per se.
No.
It's actually more value destruction.
Yeah.
I don't choose to pay government anything. I am forced to pay government things out of a threat of violence.
Yeah.
Now, people say, well, what about your your municipal water supply? Well, but I pay a water bill and get water, right? I don't pay tax hoping that we go bomb brown people in tents in the Middle East so that we can get more oil.
Yeah.
But I pay my water bill to a municipal water supply. Now, that is typically, in most cases, that is a government agency but it actually functions kind of like a business. They have a product, they process your water, they clean your water, they pipe your water, and then you pay for it. Lifetime exchange, and that could be privatized. And to be honest, if that sort of thing was privatized, you'd see a dramatic cost reduction in basically everything you do if you privatized all these services.
Guaranteed.
Another example is like from the book Market for Liberty, because people talk about this one a lot too. What about fire departments? What would you do with a fire department? How would you protect against that? Market for Liberty has a pretty interesting scenario where if you choose to live in a community by contract, you pay community dues.
Yeah.
Like an HOA, like a homeowner association due, which part of that now can be insurance.
Yeah.
You pay for community
Well, it's like
and homeowners.
you live in one building, you have to pay upkeep for the elevator, let's say.
Right,
So
that's part of your HOA, your homeowner association dues. So if you live in a community, but that community can then contract with a local fire department to protect your community, and they get paid from the homeowner's dues. And if you choose to live in that community, you're now choosing to pay the fee to be in that community. And that is a like kind of exchange of a value.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean fire departments and firemen don't exist. It just means they're managed differently. They're managed in a privatized way instead of a public way.
And I guess you would say the same for police.
Absolutely.
Well.
A great example of police is in 2008 and 9 in Detroit, when we had the economic crisis in 2008 and 9, the real estate collapse that kind of basically fucked the financial markets everywhere in the world, right? 2008-9, Detroit was the first municipal bankruptcy in U.S. history. It was the first major city, actually the first city in general that went bankrupt. Wow. Completely bankrupt. Wow. They literally filed bankruptcy. They couldn't pay their bills.
Incredible.
And so during that time, almost all of your police stations closed.
Wow.
Your fire departments, almost all your fire departments closed.
Wow.
Most all of your schools closed. They literally could not afford to pay the firemen, the policemen, the teachers. Well, what happened in Detroit during that time? The ironic thing is shortly after, I mean, there was a transition period, a few months or about a year, but actually Detroit started flourishing after that. They immediately had private security forces watching everything.
Oh, really?
Detroit was a complete shit show prior to the crisis. Detroit has actually improved dramatically since the crisis, and a lot of it had to do with them switching to private police and private fire and privately managed schools. Now, a lot of that's gone back to public now, because this has been 15 years since that happened. But for several years, a lot of your security and fire and all that stuff was completely privatized because they had no choice.
Yeah.
You basically had a bunch of firemen that said, okay, we'll be firemen, but we're gonna charge fees for it. We'll be policemen, but you pay us to manage your community, and people pay for it. So it's an interesting example because a lot of people are like, that could never happen. But we have tons of examples where it does. Yes, on a smaller scale.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, anarchy is a smaller scale.
Yeah.
There are no nation states in an anarchist environment.
Yeah.
There is no wars between Russia and Ukraine in anarchy because there is no centralized authority to organize a military to go strike another country.
Right, but it's within human nature to want to centralize. If you start gaining power, you want more and more. That's just part of human nature. That's not going to go away, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yes and no. Yes, there are just like companies, right? Companies, you start a company with one person, 2 people, 5 people. You grow. You get bigger. You have layers of hierarchy within the company. You've got distribution of responsibilities and that sort of thing. And companies get bigger and they become these large, can be, right? But you get companies like Microsoft with tens of thousands of employees, right? And that happens. But the big difference is Microsoft doesn't exist from a threat of violence.
Yes.
Microsoft exists because you and I buy their products.
Yeah.
We voluntarily choose to buy their products.
Yeah.
A country exists because of a threat of violence. It taxes you under the threat of violence. It controls the money supply, which is effectively a tax anyway.
Yeah.
When you consider,
Inflation.
Yeah. I mean, inflation is just what do they call it? The slow tax or the poor man's tax or whatever.
Yeah.
It's still a tax because the central banks control that money supply.
Yeah.
I mean, and right now we have the technology to eliminate the central money supply, central banking. I mean, we have crypto. I know you're not pro crypto, but we have the possibility. But I'm saying the technology.
I mean, the
exists.
technology is definitely interesting. It's just crypto to me just seems like a big Ponzi scheme, and you can't. I mean, look at how volatile it is. How could you actually use that as a currency to actually buy a coffee with crypto? I mean, it's insane.
Well,
with the way, let's say, Bitcoin is right now, if you knew it was stable, you could just tap it the same. Like maybe in principle, it is a better system.
You can't just tap it and pay for
but it's too volatile to keep all your assets in Bitcoin, let's say, rather than Australian dollars or American dollars.
You could flip it the other way and say it's too volatile to keep it in dollars because
But they're not as volatile as Bitcoin.
they're very volatile compared to Bitcoin.
That's not true. I mean, if you have $100,000 in your American account,
You're looking at it from the dollar perspective. You have $100,000 in your dollar account.
Right.
What if I have a Bitcoin in my account? Well, then the dollar is all over the place.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it. But unfortunately, the world is still on the dollar system.
Right now.
Yeah.
That's
actually a very important, that's actually a very interesting outlook on that. I never thought about it like that. But you're right.
And the world, by the way, has only been on the dollar standard since 1972.
Yeah. Before that, it was gold.
50 years.
Yeah.
So, in a longer view of history, the dollar is not doing well.
Yeah, sure.
In a 50-year period of time.
I mean, look, I'm not against crypto as a concept. I think it probably is correct. It's just that today, it's just people are just in it for the money. They're in it to make a quick buck.
Yeah. So you know what happened in 1972?
Go on.
So there was the basically what's his name?
Richard Nixon signed in
Nixon,
gold.
but the Bretton Woods too, but the current president, Charles de Gaulle, my God, of France.
Okay.
The current president of France at the time basically demanded. So Bretton Woods 1, which was signed back in 1934, I think.
Yeah.
Bretton Woods 1 basically fixed the dollar to at $35 per ounce of gold.
Yeah.
And then basically every currency in the world had a fixed exchange for the dollar.
Yeah.
So dollar fixed to gold, every other currency fixed to the dollar.
Uh-huh.
And so that stabilized the currency from then until 1972. Bretton Woods 1 stabilized the currency.
Was Bretton Woods, I've read that, I think when FDR was in power during World War II, the U.S. government confiscated gold off everybody. You know about that?
I mean, it was kind of fucked.
Yeah.
So they paid about $20 an ounce.
Yeah.
They made gold illegal.
Yeah,
And
they jacked up the price.
And then a few months later, they jacked it up to $35 and they fixed the dollar at $35 an ounce.
Yeah.
So, but that's a whole different story. I'm talking about only since then,
Sure.
At least if you look at fluctuations in currency values and stuff, it stayed pretty steady. I mean, there was hits for World War II and Vietnam War and stuff like that, but Korean War. But like anytime there's war, there's always some big spikes in monetary inflation and stuff. When I say monetary inflation, I mean like printing of money, because that's actually the true definition of inflation: is the increase in the money supply versus the productivity of the economy. So, 1972, basically, de Gaulle said, we want all of our gold back. We want our gold back from the U.S. Give us our gold back out of the vault. We don't want you holding all of our gold anymore. And that's when Bretton Woods 2 happened. I mean, I am summarizing the story a lot, but basically, Nixon said, we don't have your gold, and we're coming off the gold standard.
That's why they got off the gold standard.
Yes.
Right.
So, point is, you said Bitcoin is very volatile. But if you looked at the financial markets in the 70s,
Yeah.
they were all over the place because that was the advent of financial derivatives.
Yeah, but a price of a coffee tomorrow in the cafe is always going to be, what, €2 here in Brazil, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm looking at it from a Bitcoin perspective, tomorrow it might be €4, and then it might be 50 cents. And then it's just so unstable to have that right now with the way Bitcoin is going and any of these cryptos, to use them as an actual currency. It's like using Zimbabwean dollars or
You
something.
can use USDC.
That's
It's a stable coin.
it's just...
It's fixed to the dollar.
Yeah, I mean, something like that sounds more interesting to me.
But my point is, in the 70s, the dollar was crazy volatile, as were all of your currencies. So pre-gold, like pre-1972, there was no need for the financial derivatives market. So, like, let's say you're a Japanese airline and you wanted to buy oil on the futures market to even out your price of oil, because oil prices, move around a lot during the year, right? So you would buy a futures contract, like let's say a 6 or 12-month futures contract of oil, so that you could have the right amount of oil delivered for your airline, so you can stabilize your fuel price, so you can basically kind of have like fixed costs. You can manage your fixed costs of your airline, because fuel obviously is a huge input cost for an airline. Well, after 1972, Japan now, remember, dollars, because of petrodollar, dollars, you have to buy oil in dollars, basically. If Japan buys oil from Saudi, they buy it in dollars, right? So Japan has to trade yen for dollars, buy it from Saudi, right? So that wasn't necessary when the yen was fixed to dollar, dollar was fixed to gold. Once the dollar was no longer fixed to gold, and the yen was a floating exchange rate with the dollar now we have the financial derivatives market, and the dollar was boom, 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 boom. Okay? It was all over the place, because now not only does that Japanese airline need to buy futures contracts in oil to stabilize its fixed cost, now it also needs to buy futures contracts in dollars so that it can buy the oil to stabilize its price in oil. Okay? And during the 70s, at the end of that gold exchange, the dollar was all over the place. It became a new currency, and it was bouncing all over the place for years. Interest rates up and down, up, down, 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 up, down, down. Now we got to manage the monetary supply with interest rates, all types of financial derivatives. So now we had all that. What I'm saying is, we are in the early stages of that with crypto. Yes, crypto is volatile in US terms. You could say the same thing back in 1973, that oil was very volatile in dollar terms. You could flip it the other way too and say the barrel of oil is the fixed asset, and the dollar was all over the place.
Yeah, it's an interesting way of looking at that, actually.
But cryptocurrency has the technology, the blockchain technology itself, and the currency has the ability to eliminate the need for any centralized banking.
And that
we didn't need it to begin with, to be honest, in my opinion. We didn't need it to begin with, but we have it, so there's no point in arguing whether it should be there or not. But now we have cryptocurrency, which should be the natural evolution for the monetary supply.
And that I can get on board with. With that, I'm down. It's just seems there's so much Ponzi schemes in crypto.
Oh, there's tons of Ponzi schemes in crypto.
Yeah.
Most of them.
Yeah, that's my main issue.
Most of them. But you're confusing a cryptocurrency with a Ponzi scheme.
No, I'm not.
That's like saying,
theoretically, everything that you're saying, I'm fully behind.
So that's like saying the stock market is a Ponzi scheme.
Kind of is too, to be honest.
Well, there are stocks on there that are a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah, for sure.
There's lots of pump and dump situations on the stock market that are Ponzi scheme. Maybe tons of them, maybe thousands of them.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean Apple is a Ponzi scheme.
No.
It doesn't mean
Definitely
Home
not.
Depot is a Ponzi scheme, or Deutsche Bank, or
No.
Walmart.
No.
or Microsoft. It doesn't mean those companies are Ponzi schemes
No.
just because they have stock that trade on the stock exchange.
Yeah.
Bitcoin is not a Ponzi scheme, although there are tons of crypto projects out there that are absolute Ponzi schemes. I spoke at a crypto conference a few years ago, and I was on a panel with 3 or 4 other people, and the panel discussion was mostly about how to make passive income on cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
And people were asking, like, what about this project? And what about this? Or what do you guys think about this one? And every single one of the projects mentioned during that conference, I mean, I was literally the most hated person in the room.
Right.
Which is not really that uncommon, but I was the most hated person in that room because I was shitting on every project that got mentioned.
Right.
I was like, that's complete trash. That is I honestly can't believe any of you would fall for that bullshit.
Yeah.
Like, this is a complete scam. This is a complete scam. I literally can't imagine. It was like 200 people in the room. Like, I can't imagine there's one single person in this room that would fall for this scam. And everybody was like getting pissed at me.
Really?
They're getting angry because I was shitting on every single project.
Yeah, that's not what they wanted to hear.
Because confirmation bias.
Of course.
I invested in this, therefore it must be good. And I want to hear you agree with my opinion to confirm I'm right.
Yeah.
Right?
And you're on a stage. You've got more
A year later, literally a year later, I was speaking at another event in the same area, same space, and every single one of those projects I mentioned was a scam.
It was tanked, yeah.
Everyone. Tanked, gone under,
Yeah.
it'd gone essentially to zero. They were a fraud, they were a scam, they were a rug pull, they were a Ponzi scheme, something.
Yeah.
Every single one was. And I think most of them are in crypto. But that doesn't mean Bitcoin and some of the coins themselves are not viable options for the future of money.
Look, in principle, I'm down with crypto and removing the central banking system, of course. I'm down with that. But yeah, it's just the landscape right now. I guess when I hear crypto, my mind is all Ponzi, and I just get it with it.
Well, we need something for money. I mean, we live in
we need something. I mean,
globalized world, right?
You can make the argument that like USD is a Ponzi and they just keep printing it and it's a pump and dump.
USD is more of a Ponzi than Bitcoin.
Yeah, I can't understand that line of thinking. I mean, we're kind of enslaved to having Ponzi schemes as our monetary systems, maybe.
In a globalized economy, we need some form of fungible money supply.
Yeah.
Like, thousands of years ago, we used gold bars and gold coins. Okay, that worked when all of your commerce was local.
Yeah.
But now, I mean, what am I going to do if I buy my goods from a manufacturer in China? Am I going to FedEx them a stack of gold bars?
No.
Like, that makes no sense. I need some digital way to send them the money, either a bank wire or blockchain.
Yeah, well, like a blockchain based on gold and silver probably makes the most sense.
There are those, but see, I'm not a gold bug. I have some gold, I have some silver. I'm not a gold bug because ultimately gold only has value because we think it does.
Same with anything.
Right. Same with Bitcoin.
Yeah.
It only has value because
But gold has so much more heritage as having value. Gold has never in any society been considered unvaluable.
Correct. But gold doesn't meet the determinant for a practical modern currency.
Well, you just have a coin and you have a cryptocurrency tied to gold.
There's a few of those.
That is something I would get behind.
PaxG is one of those. There's a few of those out.
I would get into.
But it's still a crypto.
But it's not being used. See, I mean that
PaxG is being used a lot.
To buy, I can't buy a coffee at the coffee shop with it.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I mean. Yeah, people
actually, you can. You can on your iPhone.
Really?
Yeah, of course.
You can transfer from the
gold. Your wallet. There's several wallets that you can. I don't use my phone for my wallet.
No, I don't either.
Like
I don't either.
Like Apple Pay. My God, Google Pay, Apple Pay. There's several crypto wallets that you can connect to your Google Pay and your Apple Pay. And you can pay with Bitcoin. You can pay with PaxG. You can pay with USDC. You can pay with Ethereum. You can go buy your Starbucks on your phone just like you do now. Ding! Right there on the machine.
That's interesting.
Yeah, there's tons of that now.
Yeah.
There's entire travel websites where you can buy your plane tickets and book your hotels and rent your cars completely on crypto.
Okay.
There are, even Microsoft has a crypto option to buy their products on their website.
Okay. So it is coming.
Oh, it's not coming. It's here.
Yeah.
You're just choosing not to see it.
I'm a late adopter. I don't have any.
It's not so prolific. You're right. Like, I can't go to the average grocery store.
Yeah.
And there is sand in the wheels of progress there. Like if I want Google Pay, if I want to pay with my Google Pay with crypto, I have to connect it to a wallet that works with Google Pay.
Yeah,
I have to put coins in that wallet.
Yeah, it's a whole thing.
There is a process for it. I'm saying it's doable. There is a process for it. And then sometimes you get to some grocery store in the middle of Mexico that doesn't have what's it called, NFC. Their machine doesn't have NFC.
Right. And then you can't pay.
And then you can't pay. So then you have to either have a card where you put the chip reader, or you pay with cash, and then it doesn't work. Right?
I want to ask you one more question.
Okay,
Bobby.
let's do it.
I
know we've been going for a while.
We've been going for a while, but I want to get this one out of you. You're very successful. You're very comfortable in the financial sense. You have location independence. You live in the dream, let's say, right? What's the dream like, and what do you want to do next? Like, how do you find meaning and purpose when you already have most of what you need in this world, right?
How to find meaning and purpose?
Yeah.
And so, for me, you hit on it on our last question. I'm an anarchist. Philosophically, I am an anarchist.
Right.
I don't think
preaching the gospel of anarchism is something
partly.
you want to do.
So I don't think humans need government. I don't think humans need a centralized authority to organize and function effectively. I think getting rid of that would dramatically improve the quality of life of humanity.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And so I do, however, believe I think we will reach a time, maybe not in our lifetimes, but we will reach a point where everything is going to be organized by technology.
Yeah.
Where we don't need a centralized authority. We're going to have, like blockchain technology, right?
Yeah.
Blockchain technology is a decentralized way to interact with each other. Like trading, if I'm paying, let's say I hire you for a software project and I pay you $10,000, I give you $10,000, but that money, that paper money or that wire transfer goes through a central bank.
Yeah.
It has to be validated there. It goes to your bank. It's validated there. There's all these middlemen to validate that payment. Whereas if I pay you, I don't know how much Bitcoin is. If I pay you a quarter of a Bitcoin, I think it's about 10 grand right now.
Sure.
If I pay you 0.25 Bitcoin, that transaction happens in a second. It doesn't need the middlemen to make this. It happens without all of that infrastructure that happens. And I think there's a ton of things that can happen in our world that can happen on blockchain without the need for that centralized authority. And so my goal, my mission is to help my clients who are entrepreneurs and investors minimize their tax burden as much as possible, because entrepreneurs and investors, in my opinion, are the true economic engine of the world. Yes. It's not government.
Of course.
It's not central banking. It's people doing real things, actually trying to make the world a better place for their customers. And if I can help them keep more of their money in their pocket, they can turn around and create more advances in technology, more value. They can hire more people, provide more jobs. They can even spend more money on other people's goods and services. And in a way, it is like slowly and gradually, in my little impact, which is small, admittedly, but it's gradually starving the beast.
I love it. Maybe we can leave it at that.
And that's how I see the role in what I do is I help entrepreneurs keep more of their money to start a business.
That's great. I love your work, Bobby. It's been a great conversation.
Nice conversation.
Thanks for jumping on. We recorded this live in Salvador after the Nomad Cruise 12. And thank you for tuning into the podcast Hostel. See you next time.
Cheers.